into that. So thank you so very much. What a story. What a story we heard just a glimpse of out on the patio. This small-time itinerant preacher named Jesus, who has been traveling the countryside for 3 years now. Sometimes he has great crowds surround him, and he's feeding 5,000 with 3 loaves of fish and 3 loaves of bread and some fish. Sometimes he's walking across the water and he's stilling the storm. This man comes riding into Jerusalem with crowds bigger than he ever imagined, waving the palm branches, laying down their cloaks and palm branches so that his donkey and the colt would not have to walk on the dirt. Can you imagine your favorite coat? You know, the one that keeps you warm when you go to a Jethawks game early in the season and you're freezing to death. That one. You lay that one down in the road to be trampled by not only the donkey and the colt, but by the crowd that is following, shouting hosannas. You imagine that sacrifice that you make right there for this one who claims to be the Messiah, the one who is and was and is to come. And people are shouting hosannas. Blessed is the one who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed is the Son of David. Blessed all. Just an incredible story of joy and the great crowd. But what struck me this time was not the great crowd, but what they asked, what those who happened to be among the crowd. They said to those who were shouting, "Who is this? Who is this for whom you're shouting?" Come on, there we go. Who is this? The one for whom you are shouting, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest, Hosanna to the Lord of Lords. Who is this? What if we were among those who were asking, who is this? I see the joy, I see the power that this man has, the charisma to attract all of these people, and yet I've never heard of him. Who is he? And they say, oh, he's Jesus. Jesus, the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee. From Nazareth? Nazareth, that little town, that little raggedy town of Nazareth? How could he be anything or anybody? But he must be. Look at all the people shouting, Hosanna, Hosanna. And so what if we, not knowing anything more about him than that, decide we're going to follow him. We're going to learn more about him, but we stay off into the shadows so as not to interrupt anybody. As shy Lutherans, we kind of sit in the back as we follow this Messiah. What would we learn? What would we hear? What would we see? What would we taste and feel? What would life be like following this Jesus this week? It obviously started with an incredible day. The day he walks in, riding the donkey. It's interesting that in Matthew it says he's riding the donkey and the colt at the same time. I'm not sure how he did, rode both of them at the same time, but it doesn't matter. He rode in as the new king, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and we're going to follow him. On Monday morning, well, first of all, we would have followed him back out to Bethany after riding in and spent the night camped out there. We would have come back into the temple on Monday morning and seen the temple. We're familiar with the temple. We've been there many, many, many times in our lives, and we've seen everything that goes on at the temple. It's a regular day at the temple, a regular Monday morning, and Jesus, this one who we just proclaimed the King of Kings, makes a whip and goes into the temple and drives out the money changers and the animal sellers, and he turns over the tables and he cries about, "What are you doing, making my Father's house a den of robbers?" He didn't make many friends that day, certainly not from the religious leaders. He didn't make many friends that day. On Tuesday, he didn't make many more friends among the leaders, for he spent all of Tuesday berating and belittling the church leaders, telling them that they had it all wrong, telling parables that had them being the wicked tenant, and other parables that just put them, as we might say, in their place, but it certainly didn't make them feel any better about this Jesus. By the end of the day, they were gathered around trying to figure out the best way to take him into their custody so that they could do away with him. And we would be sitting off to the side, wondering, what is he doing? Why is he telling all of these tales, these parables? We've never heard of these parables. But why is he telling them to the leaders and being so blunt? Doesn't he know that they have all the power? Doesn't he know who they are? We fear for his life from what he's been saying to the leadership. But Wednesday comes, and he spends most of the day out near Bethany, not far, 3 or 4 miles from Jerusalem, a beautiful little village, the village where Mary and Martha lived, where he had raised Lazarus from the dead. And they spent the day out there, and Jesus spent time with his disciples and those followers that were close to him, and with us, who were back in the shadows, telling us that the time was coming near and that we needed to keep alert, telling us to do the good works that he has called on us to do, explaining that those good works weren't so that we could get into heaven, but those good works were to come from the Holy Spirit that was going to come and guide us into doing more and more good works, giving us comforting words that we would be okay, telling us that he would be taken by the church leaders, by the Romans, and put to death and be raised 3 days later. Now we're scratching our heads. He says he's going to be put to death, but he's not going to be put to death. We have no idea what he's talking about. Is this something that he's said a lot for the last 3 years? We're not kind of following along very well with what's going on. We're pretty confused. But on Thursday, the day of Passover, you know what? His followers, they invite us to come into the upper room. And again, we sit towards the back. But there they have their Seder dinner. The same dinner that they've had for thousands of years. Well, maybe not thousands, 1,200 years. They've done it every Passover evening. The same meal, the same food, the same script, asking the questions, what is this? Who said this? What did Elisha do? What does this food mean? What does that food mean? It's all very scripted. And yet Jesus, this one who came riding in on the donkey in the middle of the Seder meal, takes the bread and says, "This is my body given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." And after the supper, he took the cup and said, "This is the new covenant in my blood, given for you, shed for you, and for all people for the forgiveness of sins. Do this in remembrance of me." Again, we sit in the back and we shake our heads, completely confused. And then he takes off his robe and he starts to wash the feet of everyone around the room. And we don't want our feet washed. That's what slaves do. We're like Peter. We don't want him to wash our feet. But he does. He says, I must wash your feet. For that is what I came for. And after dinner, we go out with them out to the Mount of Olives. Once again, we're in the shade, the Garden of Gethsemane, watching and hearing and feeling and sensing that something is changing. And the Roman guard comes and takes him away with that man Judas, who just the night before was sitting at the table with him, whose feet Jesus washed, who received the bread and the wine for forgiveness. This Judas, the one who had followed him all the time, was there. He was leading those Roman troops right to Jesus. And we're even more confused, and we're more than a little scared. We're scared for Jesus, and we're scared for ourselves, because now we're a part of the group, and maybe they'll come for us next. And they take him away. They take him away to the trial. To the trial before Caiaphas, the high priest, and before Pilate, the governor, the Roman governor. And they decide to whip him almost to death. They put a crown of thorns on him, and they drag him out on Friday. They drag him out, and they nail him to the cross. And we stand back. And we've noticed that it's really only the women who have stayed. His disciples, those ones who had followed him all the time, they were nowhere to be seen. They must have been even more frightened than us. They were certainly next to be taken by the Romans. So they deserted him. And us were more confused than ever. I thought just on Sunday that he was the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Hosanna to the Son of David, the Messiah who was to come, and yet he's hanging on a cross. Hanging there like a common criminal, with a common criminal on each side. And people are spitting on him and screaming at him and saying, you know what? You saved others, save yourself. If you are the King of the Jews, they would say, then come on down from there. It was brutal. It was brutal. And for us, we couldn't figure out how this came about. But we look back. yes, confused. But we look back on that Sunday, the Sunday that Jesus rode into Jerusalem they were proclaiming him King of Kings and Lord of Lords. He came riding into town on Sunday, and he was indeed the Messiah. The one who is and was and is to come. Not like the king they expected, though. Not like the Messiah that they were looking for. Remember, when they were reading what we call the Old Testament and all of the prophecies about the Messiah, the one to come, the son of David, the one who would come like David came. They were looking for a military leader, someone like David who could run out the Romans so that they could be at peace. And not only that they could be at peace, but they could be the strongest nation in the region. That they would no longer have to worry about Rome or Assyria or Babylon or Egypt coming to take them over. He was going to be the one. But they were only half right. He was the King of Kings. He was the Son of David, the Son of Man, the one who is and was and always will be. But yet he didn't come as they expected. He didn't come full of violence, leading them out for more violence against the Romans. No, he came in love. He came not to overthrow the Romans or the religious leaders with violence, but he came to change the world with love. The one who sees us for who we are and loves us just the same. He came as the one who loves us, but yet doesn't let us stay as we are. Who keeps encouraging us, who keeps us moving forward in our faith so that we can be better tomorrow than we were today. And if we're not better tomorrow, we'll be better next week. God knows that we have our ups and downs, and he loves us anyway. The one who sees us for who we are and loves us no matter what. He came not as they expected, but as the one who died on the cross. The one who didn't stay dead. The one who rose again on Easter morning for you and for me. That's who came on that Sunday afternoon, riding into town with people waving their palm branches, laying their precious cloaks on the ground, giving their all in joy and admiration for this Jesus, the Jesus that we know, the Jesus that we trust to know our pain and our sorrow, to know our joy and our challenges, to know who we are, and love us so that we can love others. Amen. Let's stand and sing.